So in your last exercise, you went through, did your file type list. You got your list. You should have gotten to a point where you finally saw a blocking page. Finally got blocked once you were in blocking mode, and then went one step farther and customized your blocking page a little bit. So now you've got a policy that is definitely better than the front door alarm, but it's a long ways off from being as secure as what we talked about. We're like right about here. But it's time now, we've decided to take it to the next level. And we want to start looking at adding some additional lists, like URL lists and parameter lists. And that's going to be a little bit more comprehensive because there's a lot more URLs and a lot more parameters, and nobody knows anything about the application. So we really need help with that. So we're going to talk about some key things between rest of the day today and then tomorrow, which really are all about policy building. Everything I wanted to focus on is all about policy building. And what you've done is real simple. Rapid deployment and file types. But we can get a little bit more help from ASM. So to do that, we need to understand first, today, we need to understand a couple of concepts. We need to understand the difference between manual policy building and automatic policy building. And then we need to understand the difference between trusted requests and untrusted requests. It all will make a difference on how the policy gets built for us, how ASM will help us. To start, I wanted to do just a little bit of review. This is kind of a little bit of a review of what you just did in your last exercise. It's getting the learning suggestions. This is all about generating suggestions on how this policy should be built. So for example, you guys were submitting requests for Lorax.com, and we started getting suggestions. In the file type suggestion list, you had a suggestion for no ext. But we could also have added URL suggestions. I want to see all the URLs. So now we get a suggestion for that URL as well. And requests continue to come in. So we got ASP and that contact page, PDF and the instructions page, and so on. So we continue to build up this list of both file types and URLs, the suggestion lists. As a reminder, during this time, it's very possible to get invalid, malicious requests. For example, we now have a suggestion for the INI file type. We also have a suggestion for the php.ini URL. I don't want those as part of my whitelists. In addition, this request comes in with a post. It's a post request because somebody's trying to log on to the website. And to do that, they're submitting their username and password. So I might see these parameters in the suggestion list. So one of the challenges when it comes to building the security policy, especially for us, we're here F5 employees, is I don't know this website. This isn't my website. So some of the challenges sometimes is looking at these parameters and saying, I don't know, are those valid or not? How am I supposed to know that? So how can we determine if these are actually legal parameters or not legal parameters? Does anybody have a suggestion in the class? You're looking like you've got one.
You look at the code and talk to the developers, or?
Well, remember, the developers, none of them are here.
So look at the suggestions that come through.
Well, we have, and these are the suggestions. But I still don't know if those are actually valid or not, or if they were maliciously sent. But the first thing you said was,
you can't see the code, you don't know.
well, you can always see the code. So here's the web page. That's how they log in. So how can I identify the actual parameters of those two fields, the username and password?
Scope view source.
I can go in and view the source or inspect any of those parameters. And when you do that, you're going to see the actual code, as you said. You can see the code behind the page, and I can see that on this page, indeed, there is a parameter called online ID, and there's another parameter called passcode 1, so I do know that these are valid. So we're building up this suggestion list, slowly but surely. So now I'm going to talk about manual policy building. And manual policy building is what you just did in your last exercise. You were doing manual policy building. So here's my suggestion list that I've come across so far. And as you saw, we start getting these learning scores for these different suggestions. So all of my file types have a learning score. All of my URLs will have a learning score, and all of my parameters will have a learning score. And again, the learning scores will go up based on how many requests come in from users from different IP addresses and different sessions across a period of time. So for example, a little bit of time has gone by, and we've noticed that different items have a different learning scores. So for example, ASP file type has a higher learning score than PDF. Why? Because more requests come in from users for ASP file types in my website than PDF file types. So the learning score is just naturally higher. And then it continues. And eventually, we see that some of our entries have 100% learning score. So in manual mode, nothing happens at this point. It'll just say like that, and the rest of the learning scores will also continue to increase. And I mean, we could get to a point at some point where all of our learning suggestions have a learning score of 100%, but still nothing happens. So in manual mode, what you just did in your exercise is somebody, an administrator, has to go in and manually accept these suggestions to become part of the security policy. So this administrator is going to select that one and add it. They'll select this one and add it. They're going through, and they've chosen to just be safe rather than sorry. So they're just adding all of the items that have 100% learning score. But they also recognize that's valid, and they recognize that's valid. So even though these items don't have 100% learning score, they can add them as part of the policy at any time, as long as they know that they're acceptable, they're valid. Now, as you did in your exercise as well, the administrator can also either ignore or delete those other suggestions that they know are not valid. And remembering that if you delete them, they may come back in the suggestion list, whereas if you ignore them, they won't come back in the suggestion list. So this is manual mode. And again, this is what you just did in your last exercise. So no different. So there's a couple of ways of creating a security policy in manual mode. You just did one in your last exercise, but we can also go one step farther. So I've got my same things, my policy, name, rapid deployment, and my virtual server. But I'm now going to switch from my basic settings to my advanced settings. And I'll scroll down a little bit where we have a lot more things we can set when I create my security policy. The main one there I want to show you is the learning mode. Now in truth, I'm not going to change this. I just wanted to show you that what you did in your last exercise is you did create a security policy in manual learning mode. So we don't have to change anything. So let's talk about how that's a little bit different from automatic learning mode. So, same idea, just like in manual mode. We have suggestions for file types, we have suggestions for URLs, and we have suggestions for parameters, all of which have the learning scores. We have invalid suggestions, or suggestions that I don't want to be part of the policy, as well, with learning scores. And now time goes by, a couple days have gone by, and the scores go up a little bit. Again, want to iterate, the only way those scores go up is because requests are coming in from lots of different users, lots of different sessions over a period of time. Which is why, even after a week, my ASP and no EXT are up 45, 60%, but the .ini file type is still very low because not a lot of people are actually requesting that file type. And now we're at 2 weeks, and now a couple of items, a couple of suggestions have finally hit 100%. This is where the main difference is between manual and automatic. In automatic learning mode, as soon as something hits 100%, it automatically gets added to the security policy as an acceptable item, in this case, in the whitelist for both file type and for URL. And now time continues to go by, and now we have a few more items that have hit 100%, and they will automatically get added to the security policy. Now, even though we're doing this in automatic mode, an administrator can still come in at any time and manually add stuff as well before it hits 100%. But I still have these couple of items that are still in my suggestion list. Low learning score because nobody's really requesting very much. But not only can an administrator delete or ignore them, as we did in manual mode, it's even more important than that. Let's talk about why it's so important that I can't just set my policy to automatic mode and then walk away for 5 months and let things just take place. Because of the fact that as time goes by, it may take forever, but if they're not ignored or deleted, then they're just going to stay here in this list, and then time's going to go by, and time's going to go by, and time's going to go by. I think you see where we're going here. Because eventually, if nothing happens, it's possible that those might hit 100% and eventually get added to the positive security model whitelists. And we don't want that. So while we're in automatic learning mode, it's important that somebody is monitoring the suggestion list and looking for items that should be removed, should be ignored. Because remember, once I ignore them, they're never going to come back in the list ever again. And I don't have to worry about that particular INI file type or so URL or whatever it is. So that is the difference between manual mode and automatic mode, learning modes. Any questions about that so far?
I mean, anybody really use this?
I'm sorry?
Do you have any sense of whether or not people are really using this feature?
Which feature? Automatic learning?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think so, absolutely. Imagine this. So imagine this, all right? Actually, before I say imagine this, let's go to the next section, and then I will go back to my imagine this. So, I've already said that. So to create the security policy in automatic mode, I think you probably remember this. Here we have the DVWA security policy, rapid deployment. I could either do one of two things. I could, let me go back here. I could do one of two things. I could either change that, what we saw a few moments ago, I could just change from manual to automatic with rapid deployment. That works just fine. I've done that many times. Or I could change my policy template type. The two options here that we'll talk about today and then tomorrow as well are fundamental and comprehensive. What these both do that are a little bit different is, number one, they automatically use automatic learning. And number two, they automatically start in blocking mode while they're learning. And we're going to talk about that more tomorrow. The third thing they do is they also enable a lot of additional settings on the learning and blocking settings page. So fundamental adds more settings than rapid deployment, and comprehensive adds more settings than fundamental. But the key is that they both automatically start in automatic learning mode. And as I said, also in blocking mode as well. Now there's one thing that you have to do when you're using comprehensive or fundamental. You have to address, again, I've already said that. And by the way, it says, notice you can't modify that for a moment. I don't know if this is a UI issue, a mistake or not, but this right here, the application language. So by default, rapid deployment uses what you're seeing right there, Unicode. With comprehensive or fundamental, ASM says, hey, I'll go ahead and figure out the application language for you. Once I start seeing requests come in, once I get enough requests coming in, I can identify what the application language is, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. But for our lab experiences, if you don't set this, then you don't see any actual other learning suggestions until it's figured this out. So for us, we're going to save time and just specify that the application language is Unicode. And then for some reason, you'll notice that now you can change to manual mode if you wanted to. So there's all these little different things you can set. Rapid deployment with automatic, with the, there's a lot of different ways you can set this up. But the key things are the template type, the learning type, automatic, manual, disabled, the enforcement mode, are we in transparent or blocking? Those are really the three key aspects when you create a brand new security policy. And they can all be changed after you've created it too. So the second part of this lesson is the idea of trusted versus untrusted requests. So before I explain why it's important to understand that, let's identify what these two things mean. So an administrator is going to go in, when they set up the policy, either when they create the policy or after they create the policy, they can do this at any time, they can set either an IP address or an IP address range or multiple IP addresses or multiple IP address ranges as trusted IP addresses. So an administrator has to configure the trusted IP addresses. Anything else, any other request that comes in to ASM that's not on that IP address is considered an untrusted IP address. So for example, these requests are going to be considered trusted requests because they fit in the IP range there that I set as my trusted requests. These requests from the internet are all going to be considered untrusted requests. All of these devices, all 7 of these devices, can be used for learning suggestions. They will all generate a learning suggestion for the policy. However, the way they generate the learning suggestion is very different, depending on whether it's coming from a trusted request or an untrusted request, and that's the key of this part. So for example, we've got our transfer.asp. So these requests are coming in, and we've got a file type ASP, the URL transfer.asp, and you'll notice for each unique request from a unique session, from another user, from a different, it's making the learning suggestion go up, but really slowly. So requests from untrusted requests, they affect the learning score, but it goes up very slow from those untrusted requests. Now I have some other users from my internal, some time has gone by. So again, in order for that computer to affect that learning score for that file type again, they have to have some time gone by. They can't just sit there and refresh that page over and over again and have that learning score go up. Now I have some requests for that same file type and that same URL coming from trusted requests. And you'll notice that the learning scores are going up a lot faster from the trusted requests, meaning that it's a lot quicker to build a security policy from trusted requests. So to answer your question from earlier, are people actually using this? If I had a complicated travel website, it lets people book hotel, car rental, airfare, so there's a lot going on this website, and I wanted to build my security policy as quick as possible, and I want to have as much faith and trust that that policy is being built properly. What I would want to do, and here's what's great, is you can even put this website out in production. It can be in production, so you're getting requests from the internet, and all those requests from the internet are adding to the learning suggestions, but very slowly. But then I have my team of 4 or 5 developers, and I've given them all a little script to follow. And I say, what I want you to do is I want you to go to our website, I want you to sign up as a new user, then I want you to modify your user account, add a credit card, modify your credit card, look for travel, book a travel, get a hotel room. I want them to use the website and all of its functionality, everything about it. Because everything that they do on the website, because they're going to come from trusted requests, they're going to build that policy just like that. And I know that everything that they're building is valid because they're my trusted users. They're following the script. Now, if Richard thought he was being a funny, and he's like, hey, Joe, watch this. I can do a SQL injection against our database. And so he does a SQL injection from his trusted device. That's actually going to tell my web application that SQL injection requests are okay. So we would have to ensure that these trusted requests are actually submitting good requests, which is why we call them trusted. So if I was building a complicated web security policy, that's how I would want to do it. And it could be done very quickly that way.
So by that example you gave, it works the same way with enabling signatures? The signature would have caught that.
Right. Well, again, so even if we're in blocking mode, and this is where it gets complicated, but even if we're in blocking mode, but we're in automatic learning, ASM assumes everything that's coming in is new. So it's learning, and slowly, which we'll talk about tomorrow, slowly it's deciding that, maybe this one concept, this one idea, this one small part of my policy, I think this one's ready to go. I think this part is done. And then a request comes in that does not match that little part of whatever it thinks was done. For a brief moment, it may think that request is illegal. But it will learn from that request. And it will adjust the policy because of that. So it's kind of an interesting thing while you're in blocking mode, but you're still in automatic learning. At some point, you may have to disable learning because you think you're done. Because if you never disable learning, and you always stay in automatic learning forever, it's just going to continue to add stuff. And yes, I want to be really clear, if you're in automatic learning and people are firing signature violations left, right, and sideways from trusted requests, ASM's going to assume that those signatures are okay. Those are signature violations that are false positives, and we don't want to block because of those. And that may not always be the case.
Learning is also an additional CPU hit, so you shouldn't leave it long term after.
Yeah, the main, and a lot of people ask, okay, well, what if my web application changes? What if it's being, updated regularly? So here's the process that I picture a company going through. New application, let's create the security policy, go to automatic learning, hopefully get some trusted IP addresses, boom, boom, let's 2-3 weeks, let's get a policy, let's test it, make sure everything looks good, watch the log files, see what might trigger a violation. You know what? 4 weeks, I think we're good. Let's stop learning, disable learning, policy's ready to go. We can use it. 3 months later, they say, hey, we're going to add some new pages. Okay, great. we got new pages, let's go back to automatic learning and get the trusted people to start submitting requests for the new pages. Since we're in automatic learning, it's going to start learning these new pages, and hopefully that process will take less than a week or so. And now we got all the new pages and all the new parameters and forms, and boom, we'll stop learning again. That could be a process of going through that regularly as a website continues to update.
I was going to say in our shop we had our version control system, Git for our code. We got 2.0 out there with the 2.0 policy, it works great. We're working on version 3.0 of the website. We go develop 3.0, but we also relearn and we create a new version of the policy in dev, do that learning, export that policy, commit it to Git. Now it sits right beside our code. We deploy 3.0 of our application servers, 3.0 of our policy out to test and prod, and they're all versioned together.
I mean, in a perfect world, that's how you would do it. You would have a dev environment to do all that. You know, not all organizations have that. I think they should. That's a perfect world, definitely, is to have it all tested and built out in a dev environment.
It only works if you don't accept any suggestions that include the host header of the website.
Right. That's yeah, so you might have a dev.f5demo.com for your dev site, and you want your actual site to be www.f5 or whatever it is. All right, what do I have here? Oh, so again, the same rule applies, is we still have a time amount. So the key thing I want to point out, and this is actually challenging for even doing these exercises, because in order to do the exercises you're going to do to the rest this afternoon and then tomorrow, is I actually want you to see a policy getting built, like this. But I can't just have you sit at your browser going refresh, 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 because it doesn't work that way. So in order to simulate this in your browser, we have to do two things. So in your last exercise, I had you modify the learning score. In order to simulate this in a lab environment, I have to have you modify the learning score to the smallest value that's allowable in ASM, which is like 15 seconds, I think. It considers 15 seconds an acceptable amount of time from one source IP address. However, it also considers sessions unique. So you have to actually close your browser and open like a private browser window. It has to be seen as a new session within the minimum time frame. So we have to drastically lower the time frame, and in your exercise, it'll say in your exercise, use a new private window, because if you don't do that, it won't see it as a new suggestion, and you won't see your learning scores go up.
Probably uses the ASM cookie. When you open a private one, you get a new one.
I don't know if it does that or not, because I don't think cookies are used in learning. I don't think they are.
I don't know about that. Nothing else
yeah.
can be used.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly the engine behind it, but I don't think it's any client-side cookies or anything like that. So you guys did this a little bit. I think this is going to show you actually what you're going to do here. So again, on your learning and blocking settings page, down at the bottom, this is where you went. You saw all of this fun information here. What we're going to do in this exercise is just the loosen policy. That's all about learning. That's how fast, that's how much time needs to go by for untrusted requests versus trusted requests. To either create a learning suggestion or to increase the current learning suggestion score up a little bit. So the higher this number is, that's how many unique sessions from untrusted requests from all, different cities, different states, different countries, who knows. That's how many different unique sessions have to come in during a period of time there, 1 hour. So in other words, a person could only, from one IP address, one session, could only generate a learning suggestion themselves only once an hour, which again is why you can't just sit there and refresh and try to get .ini as a file type. So these are all customizable. So I guess I don't have a screen. Let me go back here for a second. So for example, I'm going to have you change this. So you're going to do a couple of things in this next exercise. You're going to do manual learning using untrusted requests, and then at some point you're going to switch to trusted requests. You're going to stay in manual learning, but you're going to switch to trusted requests. And I want your learning score to go up faster, even from trusted requests. So to do that, you've got to change this value, not 5 days, not 2 days, not 1 day, not 0.5 days, but I think I have you change this to a really low number, like 0.0001 days, which becomes the equivalent of about 19 seconds, I believe. And that enables you to submit requests from your station, and then you got to wait about 20 seconds. And then you can open up another fresh browser and submit again, and you should see a change in learning score if you do it right. We also have this method here, learning speed, fast, medium, slow. What that does is it changes the untrusted values. So for fast, it only needs requests from 10 different sources over a smaller period of time, a half an hour. Medium, it needs 20 sources over an hour, and slow needs 50 different sources, meaning it only considers something a valid suggestion or a valid change of score for a suggestion when it gets requests from 50 different sources, meaning different IP addresses and different sessions over a minimum of an hour period. So after an hour, it resets all that. So I mean, it really ensures that we don't get a lot of false suggestion information. But you can also customize it, as I said. So here's an example of a customized screen. So this is like really, really slow. They really want slow learning speeds. But you will notice that the learning speed between fast, medium, and slow, it does not affect the trusted traffic because these numbers are already as low as they can get. You can't make 1 less than 1, and you can't make 0 less than 0. So my point here is what I'm trying to get at is the learning speeds of fast, medium, and slow only affect the untrusted traffic. Only affect untrusted traffic. So how do I define this when I'm creating, how do I define whether it's trusted traffic or untrusted traffic? Well, I can do it in two ways. I can either do it while I create the policy, or I can actually do it after I create the policy. So here I am in my new policy. I'm in blocking mode. I've already got my application language. This is where I can now put in one or more IP addresses or IP address ranges. So for example, I'm adding 10.1.10.0. This information only affects trusted requests. This information only affects untrusted requests. So this is how I can immediately change that learning score speed. Both of these can be changed later after you've created the policy. You can add more IP addresses if you want. You can remove IP addresses, and you can change the learning speed if you want as well. I just showed you that on the last screen. So to summarize, all of that we just covered has to do with building the policy, getting those learning suggestions, and increasing the learning suggestion scores for all these different items. The key to all this for building a policy is building my positive security whitelist, getting things added to the policy. So I either manually add stuff to the policy or I automatically have it added to the policy. And if you're automatically having it added to the policy, it only gets added once it hits 100%, and it's going to hit 100% a lot faster from trusted requests then untrusted. That's kind of the whole picture summary there. So in this exercise, I really want you to see a couple of things. Like I said, you're going to first create a new policy in manual mode using only untrusted requests. And you should see learning scores going very slow. Then you're going to add a trusted IP range. You're going to add a trusted IP range after the policy is created. And you should start seeing learning scores go much faster, but not being added to the policy because you're in manual mode. Then you're going to start with a brand new policy. You're going to recreate the policy, but this time you're going to do it in automatic mode using trusted IP addresses. And again, you should see a very different result.